Hi all and welcome to this revision video looking at Language Paper 1 question 4. This is often referred to as the statement or debate question. It's the longest of the reading questions on paper 1 and it does deserve the amount of time that you are expected to spend on it, as it is worth approximately half your marks for the reading section. So worth spending time on it, worth not getting bogged down in question 2 and question 3. We're going to talk about the question. We're going to talk about approaches to how we can look at that question and methodology to approach that, and followed by an actual response to question 4. So here we go. Okay, so within this question, we're going to refer to the Silk Factory extract, which there is a link to in the video description, along with the question paper. The question itself, question 4, is worth 20 marks. So we are spending about 20 to 25 minutes on this question, depending on how much time you have left within the reading section. Remembering you're meant to spend about an hour on the reading question, including question 1, 2, and 3 beforehand. You are given a specific part of the extract to look at. So we are focusing this on the second part of the source from line 24 until the end. Unlike question 2, you are not given this as a separate extract. It's up to you to make sure you're referring to this. And again, you are referring to that particular extract. Anything outside of that is not rewarded as fully. You were given a statement. So in this case, the student said, "I was not at all surprised by the disappearance of the stranger child at the end of the extract. The writer left us in no doubt of this. She is a part of Rosie's imagination. To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider the disappearance of the stranger child, evaluate how the writer presents the stranger child, and support your response with references to the text." Now, we know that rather than saying could, what that actually means is that you should be doing these things. So we need to talk about the child disappearing, we need to talk about how the writer presents the stranger child, and we need to talk about references from the text. That's absolutely crucial. You must be using evidence within this question. So the student says, "I was not at all surprised by the disappearance of the strange child, and that she's just a part of Rosie's imagination." How far do we agree? Ideally, we are looking for a range of different responses to this. It's not always easy to do this, but we are looking for at least 2 ways in which we can agree with this, and ideally, if we can, find one that slightly disagrees with this. If you've got a nice extract like this, where there is multiple interpretations, that's great. If not, it can be a little bit more challenging. So, some ideas. The fact that it implies Rosie's imagination. The fact that Cara, who's the daughter, seems unfazed by the girl's presence. This seems like an interesting point to me, because we could say that Rosie's child in the garden didn't notice her, which tells us that it's just Rosie's imagination. If the girl was real, then Cara would be reacting to that. You could also argue that the ghostly elements, such as the matted, dusty-looking plait, the fact that the girl looks really tense and hunched shoulders, the homemade Cinderella costume, and the idea of where on earth did she come from, the supernatural fairy tale elements seem to tell us that anything could happen, including the disappearance. We've also got some elements that seem that this is almost like a reflection of Rosie herself. Rosie registering that the girl was left-handed, the fact that Rosie seems to be able to make quick judgments about who this child is. It could be that the child's ghostly rather than Rosie's imagination. Like I said, there's multiple interpretations of this, and because it's a ghost story, a supernatural story, it's quite easy to argue both ways. There's lots of interesting adjective choices, lots of different ways in which the child is described that we can use to develop this. Now, with question 4, we are looking at a SETIES structure, which is statement, evidence, technique, explain and analyze, and then refer back to the statement. It's worth screenshotting this and writing this down as part of your notes, because the structure of the response will follow this methodology. So we're starting with a quotation. We're going to have a look at this quotation that Clara seemed unfazed by the girl's presence. We're going to focus on this idea about her being unfazed. We could, like the same as we did with question 2, we can look at multiple interpretations. If someone is unfazed, it might suggest that they're uncaring. It might suggest that they can't even see. It might be that the child is not threatening. It might be that the child seems familiar. It might be that the child comes across as ghostly and invisible. So there's lots of different interpretations of this, and we will talk about multiple interpretations within the extract. So we start with our statement. It's important to engage with it. So whether you agree or disagree, tell us within this opening sentence. I somewhat agree with the statement that the child is a figment of Rosie's imagination, as it appears that none of the other characters can either see or interact with her. What evidence do we have? As Rosie closely observes the girl, her daughter has no reaction whatever, as Clara seems unfazed by the girl's presence. Again, the embedding evidence rather than saying, for example. Terminology. The imagery at this point reveals that the daughter is calm and cool, not frightened or intrigued like her mother. Go back and you have, in particular, the adjective unfazed implies that Rosie's daughter is unconcerned by this strange, mysterious girl, which would be unusual if she could see her. Similarly, this suggests a carefree child at play rather than one disturbed by a stranger in an unfamiliar setting. Notice that this is the most detailed part of your paragraph, the explanation and your exploration of the language. So we're looking at multiple interpretations. She's unconcerned by the strange, mysterious girl, but also she's a carefree child at play rather than being disturbed by a ghostly child. And then we go back to the statement. Overall, I feel this supports the statement as Rosie's daughter appears unable to see or interact with the strange girl, implying it's a hallucination or Rosie's imagination. Now, because we have 20 minutes to do this, we are looking at 3 paragraphs. Ideally, if you can, 2 that agree and 1 that potentially disagrees. So if we're reading from top to bottom, I somewhat agree with the statement that the child is a figment of Rosie's imagination, as it appears none of the other characters can either see or interact with her. As Rosie closely observes the girl, her daughter has no reaction whatsoever, as Clara seems unfazed by the girl's presence. The imagery at this point reveals her daughter is calm and cool, not frightened or intrigued like her mother. In particular, the adjective unfazed implies that Rosie's daughter is unconcerned by this strange, mysterious girl, which would be unusual if she could see her. Similarly, this also suggests a carefree child at play, rather than one disturbed by a stranger in an unfamiliar setting. Overall, I feel this supports the statement as Rosie's daughter appears unable to see or interact with the strange girl, implying it is a hallucination or Rosie's imagination. I would recommend either screenshotting or copying this text and then going back and having a look at the SETIES structure. Have a look at how I've done it in different colours, looking at referring to the statement at the start and the end, the evidence I've used, embedding of a technique, and the explanation / analysis / exploration of that particular bit of language that we have used, trying to get in a variety of different interpretations. So that is question 4. I would argue that we need to spend, it's quite tricky within the language paper because we quite often run out of time, but I would be expecting, if you are tight on your time for question 2 and question 3, spending at least 20 minutes, if not 25 minutes on this question, trying to get as much detail as you possibly can. It's worth 20 marks and you need to give it the time and the justification to be able to get into the higher bands of this question. The next video we're going to have a look at is looking at question 5, which will have a look at the creative writing task and looking at some alternative ways of planning and approaching that question, which again is worth 50% of the paper. So it's worth spending a fair bit of time revising and planning for those different ideas. So until then, take care. Thank you very much.